South Korea and the US have agreed on moves to shore up Seoul's defenses in response to the increasing North Korean threat. The South is now able to free up the payload of its own ballistic missiles. It was previously limited to weights of up to 500 kilograms. The country is also temporarily deploying 4 additional THAAD anti-missile systems as well. 2 of the 6 possible launches are currently operational. Donald Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in managed to speak on the phone on Monday, but it took more than 24 hours after the North's nuclear test for them to get on the phone. Paula Hancock reports on the strange divide between these two leaders.
It started so well. A state visit in June, a dinner agreement on North Korea. Then a slight blip as US President Donald Trump publicly chastised the South Korean leader for what he saw as an unfair trade deal. But North Korean missile launches brought back the alliance we are used to seeing. Shows of force, US and South Korean military side by side, shoulder to shoulder. And now this, on Sunday, a direct jab at the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's desire for more dialogue with the North. A tweet from President Trump that read, "South Korea is finding, as I have told them, that their talk of appeasement with North Korea will not work. They only understand one thing."
You can't really get a more toxic term than appeasement. And so to throw that at your ally, who apparently is saying to President Trump, look, dialogue needs to be part of the mix, at this moment when North Korea has just tested a nuke, it's a real head spinner as to, what the president thinks he gets out of that.
Senior US White House officials tell CNN Mr. Trump has grown frustrated with Mr. Moon's stance on North Korea, which he believes is too soft. President Trump spoke to Japan's leader Shinzo Abe twice in 24 hours over North Korea's actions, but took far longer to pick up the phone to South Korea's leader, leading some in Seoul to ask what happened. This man says, we're the ones dealing with this directly. It's fine to talk to Abe, but Trump should have talked to the South Korean president first. If there's war, it will be on this peninsula. This young woman says if the US responds too strongly to North Korea might choose an extreme response. I'd like to know what responsibility Mr. Trump would take if that happens. Walking the streets of Seoul, it doesn't look like a country technically at war. Tensions are not visible. But there is concern all the way up to the president that military confrontation with the North be avoided at all costs. Add to that President Trump's insistence a free trade deal that South Korea thought was signed, sealed and delivered be renegotiated. Confusion is rife. One side that couldn't be happier about this perceived rift between the US and South Korea, North Korea. A less unified response to its nuclear and missile tests only gives Pyongyang political success as well as its recent technical success. Paula Hancock, CNN Seoul.
I want to bring in Foreign Ambassador Dan Feldman at our Washington Bureau for more perspective on this. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. So Donald Trump's strategy so far of trying to essentially bully China and South Korea into compliance, just give us your thoughts on how you think that strategy might backfire.
I think that's exactly the opposite of what's needed right now. I think that strategy by President Trump is neither smart nor strategic, and I think it's actually both dumb and dangerous. I think this is exactly the moment when we have to reassure our strongest democratic regional allies in the region, particularly South Korea, and this is the time to ensure that he's not calling them appeasers, as he did in a tweet, that we're not threatening to withdraw from a trade pact at the worst possible moment, but really that we are demonstrating that we are there for South Korea in very tough times, and we will be the ally that we have said for many, many years that we will.
For the president, though, just from what I believe would be his perspective, he's probably thinking, it is now time for me to actually use my words to force China to wake up, to force China to say, you know what, forget about the possible instability on our borders. We actually have to do something about North Korea. Isn't there something to be said for that element of it?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for diplomacy, but that's not what I've heard from the president or this administration thus far. In fact, diplomacy is the only thing that has ever frozen for a period of time North Korea's nuclear ambitions from the mid-'90s to about a decade later. But this administration doesn't yet have an ambassador to South Korea, doesn't have the senior Korean officials at either our State Department or Defense Department. And this is the time that we need to do exactly what you just said. We need to rally the world and come up with a plan, including very specifically to help put pressure on China to then use its own leverage with North Korea. Some of that may be economic sanctions. Some of that may be diplomatic resolutions. There are cyber and intelligence and communications dimensions, but there has to be a very coordinated, integrated plan, and that's what we have not seen.
You know, Moon Jae-in and President Trump are very different people. I'm talking about A, in terms of personality, but B, of course, in terms of their rhetoric towards Pyongyang. If they're so different in their ideology, I mean, obviously, Moon Jae-in has a much more sort of pacifist, negotiating policy towards North Korea. If they're so different, how do these two men actually work together?
Well, they work together because there's a common national security threat, and we have to demonstrate, as the U.S. has for decades, that we are stalwart allies, especially to South Korea right now, to Japan, and we'll take this opportunity to lead the rest of the world. Now, Moon Jae-in has only been in for 4 months, and I think he has not been an appeaser during this period. In fact, he's really welcomed some strong rhetoric and has looked for a variety of options as well. So I think we have to carve out a relationship that works in the interest of both of our countries. But the first step to that is doubling down and ensuring that South Korea knows what a strong ally we are and that we will remain by their side in this moment of instability.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, we appreciate your take on this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.